All right, welcome everyone. I am excited to have all of you here today. Before we start, I want you to introduce yourselves if you are online. So just type your names and the countries that you're from, and then I will acknowledge you. And at any point, if you have questions, at any point of time when our panelists are presenting, please do feel free to type in your questions and we will answer your questions. So I'm really excited for our event today. I'm so thankful that you took the time to join in. I'm so thankful that our panelists are here and they took the time to be here to share their wisdom and insight. I'm also thankful for our sponsor for the event today, Human Innovation Creations. Human Innovation Creations is a company focused on approaching how we do humans at the workplace. They're dedicated to reinventing how human capital can be empowered. So I know I am excited for this webinar of Fear Has a Face, and you are excited. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce you to the two panelists shortly. But for those who do not know who I am, I'm Mila Duchamp. I'm a speaker. I'm the founder of Human Innovation Creations and the creator of Fear Has a Face. I started this Fear Has a Face as a challenge on Instagram because of my own experiences, and I started off passively, right? And then I saw a post from Roxanna saying, nothing is passive, I'm going hardcore. And that just motivated me. I was like, you know what? I'm going to kick everyone in the balls. I mean, not literally, just in my head, I was saying that. But my motivation behind creating Fear Has a Face stems from my own personal experiences. I have experienced nuanced types of fear during my childhood and during my adulthood. During my childhood, from the age of 10 to 12, I was physically abused by my teacher, verbally assaulted by my teacher. And the fear that was implanted in me was done on a daily basis. You know, I dreaded going to school because I would get slapped every day, I would get yelled at every day, I would call stupid every day, I would get called stupid and fat every day. It was just verbal assault after physical assault. And I know at one point of time, not one point, this was a daily affair where my teacher would pull my hair and slam my head against the wall just because I was a slow learner. All that abuse kind of eroded my confidence, eliminated my identity, oppressed my voice, because fear was such a heavy thing that I cannot even describe. Right. And then during my adulthood, I experienced fear again for 2 years, where I had different types of managers where they would constantly pick on me, and I didn't know when I was going to get yelled at, because it was on a daily basis where I was yelled at, I was picked on, I was said that I was a foreigner, I couldn't communicate. Everything I did was wrong. I was even told that I didn't have any skills. My character was defamed. And you would think as an adult, you know, you'd have the confidence, but no, the amount of fear that I experienced was just detrimental when people spew these toxic words onto you. And I found myself again, my identity being eroded. It was just like acid. When someone takes an acid or pours onto your body, I don't know if you've been in a chemistry lab, but pours onto your body and your hair gets burnt, and then your skin gets burnt, your tissue gets burnt, and then your flesh gets eaten at. That's exactly how my confidence and identity eroded when fear was instilled on a daily basis. I hated going to work. I even thought about suicide at one point in my time, during my time when I was in the corporate life for 2 years. And I knew I was going to lose my job because it was just, they were creating this environment where here's your paycheck, run. It was carrot on the stick. And I thought to myself, no matter what I did, no matter how I improved, it was the perception that my managers had created, and they were so set on creating this fear in me to phase me out. And I decided to switch jobs. And that's when I took a 6 to 7 month journey to really find what fear was and if it's quantifiable. And during my journey of reflection and research, I finally found that fear does have a face. We need to talk about it. Fear is inherently present in our work life, social life, and personal life. More so in our personal life, and work life, and no one wants to talk about it. So that's why I created this movement, and I want to empower women. I want to bring unempowered women to talk about this, that fear does have a face and we can overcome it. And that's why I created the three-prong method, RAE: recognize, acknowledge, execute, via baby steps to overcome your fear. And here I am today doing this, and people said that I will not be able to do this. So overcame that fear, people. So again, I have two great panelists today. Let me introduce you to them. First, I have Roxanna Safdia. She is the founder of the Black Sheep Survives. She created this community as a safe place where people speak about abuse and healing. She's a phenomenal speaker and a coach where she hosts weekly live sessions on Instagram. The next panelist we have is Bryan, is the founder of One Goal Revolution. She's an entrepreneur, podcaster, and a PR specialist. Kate founded One Goal Revolution with the intention of giving women a voice on her platform. She travels all throughout the years, meeting, speaking, and interviewing some of the most phenomenal women. It is such an honor to have both of you today. Thank you for coming, Roxanna and Kate.
Thank you, Mila. It's wonderful to be here.
Yeah, it's great to be here.
Oh, fantastic. I want to start with, I want you to share your story, because I've spoken with both of you for my podcast, spoken about your fears. I want you to share how you recognized fear by putting a face to your fears and then overcoming it by taking small solutions. So I'm going to open up the panel. Who would like to go first?
I can go first. Okay. So thank you so much, Mila, for having me here today. Nice to meet you, Kate. You're awesome so far.
You're awesome too.
So I'm Roxanna Safdia from the Black Sheep Survives, and I created a little place on social media where it's a safe place to talk about abuse and your own personal experience. And I feel like this has been groundbreaking because so many people live their life and they don't know that they've been abused. They are in it right now and they're like, oh, they hear like my story or someone else's story that they commented and they feel validated. They feel like, I did live through that. Okay, wait, let me take a second, go back and reflect. So it's a really, really good positive experience for the most part. I started this place because I needed an outlet to express myself. And I quickly realized what I call dysfunctional family is actually abuse. So I grew up under a dysfunctional family, and now I say it's an abusive family. And when you grow up under this, you have no idea. You have zero idea. You're just kind of like, well, those are my parents, those are my siblings, those are my grandparents, and everything seems normal to you. So I don't really have a memory from childhood that hasn't had some sort of abuse connotation to it. And growing up in an abusive household, you are unsafe and you're living constantly on survival mode. We needed to be prepared for anything. This includes packing up at any hour some of your clothing to escape a potential situation. And with that comes helping out your siblings pack as quietly as they can so we can get out at just any time. So I always lived with that fear in my back. Daily, I would make sure that I wasn't seen or heard so I wouldn't disturb any abuse or rattle any cages. And as you might have guessed, I lived in fear for most of my life. We tend to think that fear is something we can control, something that we could easily figure out, but fear is just one layer that victims need to deal with. Victims often deal with depression, anxiety, panic attacks, staying in the abuse cycle because it's the only thing we know how to do. We know how to be there for others. We want to make things better because we have been raised to make things better for other people. It is our conditioning to be there for everyone, and that includes abusers. So if we're there for everyone and we're picking up the pieces and we're, packing in the middle of the night and we're doing all this stuff, we're not there for ourselves. We've never been taught to be there for ourselves. And when abusers feel your disconnect, they reel you back in by sharing a real or made up experience that have happened to them previously, such as, I was also abused by my parents. So this is just sort of like, if you have that connection with a partner after you left your abusive family, they kind of keep you tied up by saying, oh, well, I also had an abusive background. And this story is usually horrific in nature, and they do so you're a constant in their life. You're actually their punching bag. Every time something happens, you don't leave like their parents did. And you know why you don't leave? It's because the abuser needs you. They need your compassionate nature. They're counting on it. And meanwhile, they have zero compassion for you. And they're the ones creating all the abusive treatment in the environment. And this happens like in any relationship, family, work relationships, friend relationships, partners, anything like that. They use your compassionate nature just to get their way. For me, everything came to an end after suffering several panic attacks in the course of weeks apart. I became afraid to answer the phone. I became afraid to drive. I became afraid to leave my house. And I knew I needed to figure out why I had this fear. But it was actually a manifestation of every unhealthy relationship I was trying to carry for years. Putting up with abuse had manifested and physically attacked my body. And it was at this time that I decided to do something different. I had no idea what it was, but I knew I had to change my life. And I decided right then and there to start changing my eating habits, also my physical habits. And I enrolled into my master's program in conflict analysis and resolution, just because I wanted to go into a field where I could be of service. And I also wanted to figure out all my relationships. So I've always been attracted to conflict analysis, resolution, psychiatry, all of those things, just because I needed to figure it out. I was craving to figure it out. But most importantly, I decided to look inwards. And the most important thing we can do to combat fear is to do something different. We say we want to change our lives all we want, but the real way to combat fear is through action. Break out of the conditioning that you have been led to believe, other people's criticism of what you should be doing, of how right or wrong every decision you make is not up for them to decide. This is your life. And I'll say it again, this is your life. You're here to be different. You're here to teach us something we can't learn from books. And you're special, and don't let fear hold you back from what you really want to do. Thank you for hearing my story.
Wow, Roxanna, that's powerful. You said that it becomes physical. It's a physical, you took upon yourself. And you mentioned something which really stood out to me, eating habits, right? And that is something that I experienced when I experienced abuse during my childhood and adulthood. That fear, when people instill fear into you, it sneaks up on you. Fear just sneaks up on you, and then before you know it, it's too late. I turned to food all the time, and I gained like 40 to 50 pounds, and it is a form of physical abuse when we eat something to forget about something. I do not think people actually realize that impact that food has. You know, food has the ability to heal us or to kill us. And
yes, that's very powerful.
And how do you overcome it? Because because food is so comforting. I love French fries and cake. Every time I'm depressed, I go to French fries, cake, and ice cream. That's my food. How? Yeah. And it was killing me because I would get chronic migraines, I would get chronic depression and asthma. How do you actually overcome when you're in a state of fear? How do you overcome and gain that consciousness, no, I'm not going to eat that?
I think a lot for me personally, when I've been at my heaviest, that's when you see the worst signs that I've been truly unhealthy. And I like to just live in the present. So from now, like when I started just reflecting things and everything, I just live in the present, because now I'm like, okay, I'm okay. I have cheat meals and I have cheat days. It's okay. But I also make a conscious decision where I'm like, okay, I'm going to cheat for this meal, but I'm going to get right back on my plan, because I like to live in the present. I do. A lot of things I was just eating my feelings, because I was feeling so bad and I couldn't do anything about it. I was just so anxious that I needed something comforting. And that's where food would come in for me. And still does. It's a challenge. And this is something that I know that I have to battle, because it's just what I'm predisposed to. I'm used to just, I get depressed and I want something easy and fast to eat, and I just don't care what it is, and then we start treating ourselves like garbage cans, because we're just eating fast food and junk and just inhaling all that food. And there's nothing wrong with having a cookie or cake or French fries or whatever you want. But it's making it 3 meals a day plus snacks is where you're gonna suffer the most. And I think we need to connect of how we feel with how we eat. And every time I know that I slip my eating habits, I start feeling bad again.
Yeah, like it goes like a cycle. So, Roxanna, what would you think? What would you point out one catalyst that really pushed you to stay consistently with, I'm going to fight this?
Where I'm going to fight for myself, you mean?
Yes.
I don't know if okay. So I had this really huge wake-up call, and let me see how I could phrase this, but somebody who is like the closest person to me ended up getting really sick. And when I heard that that person was sick, I didn't have any sort of emotional attachment to it. I was just like, okay. And then that's when I realized like something's really wrong with me. I should be having a reaction. I should be feeling some sort of way. If anybody else would hear this, they would be devastated. So why don't I have that same reaction? And that's when I noticed like, okay, something's going on with me. Like I don't process things like I should have processed things. And I started looking into it. And then somebody else came flying along at the same time and just provoked me to a place where I lost everything. Like at that moment, it was more of a primal scream that came out of me. And it was like I was fed up. And that's when I noticed like I have to choose myself. I can't just be the punching bag for everyone and whenever it suits them. And that's kind of where I was at, that it was a crossroads where either I keep putting up with other people's demands of me and let them treat me some sort of way where it wasn't a exclusive beneficial relationship. It was just me getting treated like crap. And at that moment, I chose myself for the first time in my whole entire life. I decided to choose myself, to fix myself, to see what was going on, and just to be a better mother and a better wife to my core family instead.
That's really powerful, Roxanna, and it's important to choose ourselves. A lot of us forget that we have to choose ourselves. It begins with us. And even in the midst of all this fear and bullying and abuse, we have to remind ourselves that it is us that we have to protect ourselves. Thank you for sharing your journey.
You're welcome. Thank you for hearing me. And that was a lot.
So, Kate, what about you? I'd like to hear your story of, is that a situation, a string of events, or one prominent event where you experienced fear and you were able to put a face to fear and some of the solutions that you took?
Sure. First of all, both of you are so beautiful, and I'm so honored to be on this webinar with you. Your stories are just so I'm like still processing. I know Mila's story, but I still am like processing so many of the things that you said. And so thank you so much for sharing your stories with all of your followers, but also everybody who's watching this, because I think it's so important for women to speak up and to share their stories, and it only empowers and encourages other women to share their own stories. My story is different from yours, but I think that from both of yours, but I think that there are similarities especially in the discussion about fear. When I was 4 years old, I was diagnosed with something called Job syndrome, which at the time there were only 25 documented cases in the entire US. And what comes with that is a lot of food allergies. So I'm pretty much allergic to everything. I know you were talking about food. I'm allergic to dairy and gluten and eggs and nuts. So even from a young age, I was allergic to a lot of things. And for me, it really came down to just being organized and like making choices. And I knew that if I ate gluten, I would get eczema, because I had terrible eczema as a little kid, where I almost looked I would itch my hair out. So I looked like a little chemo patient, a kid with cancer, even though I didn't have cancer, and had terrible lesions all over my skin, on the bottoms of my feet, on my hands. And so I would go to school and I had like my little red face and barely any hair. My mom would braid. Now you can see it. I have lots of hair. So a lot of things have changed, but being a young kid and struggling with something like that, that was so public, there wasn't really any way that I could hide my immune deficiency and what was going on, and being a little kid and having terrible food allergies. I never wanted to speak up in school and say, I'm allergic to peanuts. And if you eat peanuts or somebody brought something in that I was allergic to, my throat could close. It was just kind of, I guess in a lot of ways I lived in fear as a little kid, because I also didn't understand it, and didn't understand what I now understand. Now I know what to do if I have a reaction and know how to treat that. But in a lot of ways, I think I lived in fear in the same way that you both did, different, but the same, where you're a little kid and you're not sure how do you get yourself out of a situation. And most of the time you can't really get out of a situation. Now being older, we know that we have choices that we can make to get ourselves out of a bad situation. But as a little kid, there's not very, very much that you can do. So I lived kind of in fear in that way. And then I stopped speaking in class in second grade, because every time I would raise my hand, it would bring attention to me. And obviously, like, it would bring attention to my immune deficiency, and people would look at me, or kids would make mean comments, or I wouldn't be invited to birthday parties. I mean, the list goes on. I could tell you all kinds of stories. But the teachers started realizing that I wouldn't speak in class. And I was always a really outgoing little kid and very personable and loved everybody and wanted to be everybody's friend. But they thought it was weird. Why was it that I stopped speaking in class? And it really came down to, I was fearful of what other kids would say, or what other kids would think, or if I said something wrong, they would just make fun of me, or whatever, whatever the reasoning was. I stopped speaking in class. And my mom ended up figuring it out, and she was like, I'm going to put you in Irish dancing. And I did not want to do Irish dancing. I was like, no, mama, please. Because then I would have to stand up in front of the class, and in my Irish dance class, and do my little dance. And it was, again, like kind of shining a spotlight on me. And I was terrified of that. But through that fear, I ended up kind of powering through as a little kid, and said, I'll try it 2 weeks. I'll go 2 weeks. And my mom said, yeah, okay, you can go for 2 weeks. And that ended up becoming my magic feather, Irish dancing, because it was something that set me apart. And it was something that I was so afraid to do, but it ended up kind of making me really unique, and helped me to find my uniqueness and my power. And that gave me something that made me really special. When I would go to like talent shows and stuff in school, I would do my little Irish dance routine, and it made me unique, which we all are. We all have these unique things about each and every one of us is different and unique, and that's really beautiful. And I think we need to find that part of us, because then that gives us courage to overcome the fear. And so it was through something simple, you know, like finding a hobby or something that you're talented or just something that you love. Maybe you're terrible at it, but you just love it. That sets you apart and gives you courage to power through that fear. So that, I would say that's a really big piece of my story, as a little kid, you know, finding my value and finding my purpose. But that has been a continuation throughout my entire life. And when I sat down thinking about this webinar, I sat down and wrote down, what is fear? Because I think, first of all, each and every person needs to define fear, because there are a lot of definitions of it. And I think for everyone, it's a little bit different. But for me, it's always been the unknown. So I'm always afraid of, you know, I don't know what to anticipate. And I think each of us, even in some of the stories that we talked about on this webinar, you're fearful. Not only are you fearful of what's going to happen to you, but you're more fearful of, like, you don't know how to anticipate it. Because I think with fear, we can be afraid of things, but if we know how to anticipate it, we can be ready. We can be kind of work through in our head, how do we deal with it? You know, going on a roller coaster, you can watch it and you can see, okay, I'm scared to go on it, but I can anticipate that it's going to be a drop and then it comes right back up and I don't have to deal with it anymore, you know? So I think it's the fear of the unknown. And on the one hand, you know, we're all in control of our own destiny. And I hear a lot of that from especially female entrepreneurs or entrepreneurs in general. They're like, you control everything, but some things are out of our control. And I think that we need to just be okay with that and understand that. And the things that, you know, are out of our control oftentimes are things that we have to deal with. And it's really like how we react to those things. The things that are in our control, for sure. Like if you are in a bad situation, get out of it and choose to get out of it and find a way out of it. But the things that we can't control, a lot of times it's how we react to it. And I think that's really the same with fear, is we can be fearful of things. And sometimes our fear is legitimate. There's a reason why we're afraid, but it's how we react to that. You know, if you're in a terrible car accident or something terrible happens to you, you know, you're attacked or something, you can't really control it, but it's how you react to that. You know, get yourself out of the situation, or how you deal with rehabilitation, or how you, you know, overcome what happened to you. And I think we all have wounds, but those scars always exist. And I think Mila and I have talked about that before. The scars are always with us, but it's what we do through those scars. You know, it's like you have this wound, but it's like how you handle it is what really matters. Dale Carnegie has a really awesome quote, and he says, if you want to conquer fear, don't sit at home and think about it, go out and get busy. And I love that, because a lot of times, like, we're most fearful when we're like sitting at home thinking about all the different things that could happen. But once we actually put one foot in front of the other and start making a move, and I think in my own life, I can point to so many things in my life where I was terrified. I moved to Ireland and went and did a master's over there. And a lot of people probably thought I was crazy doing that, but it was one of the best things that I ever did. And I'm so happy that I just jumped, you know, and I was prepared for as much as I could control, but I also was open to whatever the future held. Then I moved to DC, and the same thing, you know, I didn't really have a lot of things figured out, but I'm really grateful for all of my time there. And now starting One Girl Revolution, this platform that tells the stories of everyday women who are changing the world through their lives, through the podcast, and also through videos. One Girl Revolution really stemmed out of so many aspects of my life, you know, being afraid of things, but knowing that we have the power, that each and every one of us has the power to change the world, to change the lives of other people around us, you know, whether it be making a meal for an elderly person in our neighborhood, or just smiling at somebody. I mean, how rare is it that you even like make eye contact with somebody anymore, because people are always on their phones. So I think really getting people to think about, you know, what is fear to them? What is fear in their lives? And what are things that they're afraid of, and why? Because we have to ask that question. Why are we afraid of it? Is it because it's a legitimate thing? Well, then how do you deal with that legitimate thing? Or if it's something that you just are afraid of, the unknown, go, you know, power through, and make the choice to power through in any way that you can. And then also just helping each and every one of us see our power, that we won't be hindered by fear, because we have a choice to power through. We have to choose to power through, because if we just lived in fear all the time, we wouldn't really be living fully. And so that's a lot of my story and some of the things that I was thinking about with regards to fear. But I'm really grateful to be on this webinar.
Oh wow. Okay, that's great. You point out some really good points. I was like busy taking notes as well. You said something that really stood out to me. You said that you did not speak out in class because you were afraid that you draw all this attention to yourself. So speaking up, it's, people find it difficult, especially when they're going through something. And as a child, I've experienced it too. I did not dare speak out. Did you ever experience from not speaking up in class because you had this conscious mind where people are going to portray a perception of you? Did you find yourself that your identity or your voice being eliminated? Did you find yourself that you could not be the person whom you actually were before joining the Irish Dons?
Yeah. So I think that's a really important point to think about, because yes, like we all have a voice and we all have things to say. And even as a little kid, and the truth is I still struggle with that today. And I think most people do, because you don't want to appear stupid or dumb when you're in a group of people. I still struggle with that, but I make the choice every single, which is crazy, to think about something that you went through as a little kid that can still affect you. But it still does. And I make a choice every single day to rise above that and say, when I'm in situations, sometimes I'm really comfortable, and I'm not a shy person, but I still kind of like revert back to those things. But I always have been a person, even as a little kid, that was very determined, that knew who I was and what I wanted to say and what I believed. And my parents used to joke when I was 4 years old, they would joke that I was either going to be the CEO of a Fortune 500 company or the dictator of a small nation. And they still joke about it today, because they're like, I just always was this determined little kid. And so I wasn't who I truly was when I was being quiet, because I always had things to say.
Yeah, wow. And you mentioned something that earlier on when you said that your fear is very different from my fear and Roxanna's fear, and you hit it on the nail. I was reflecting the other day, and I thought, when we see a lot of influencers on social media saying that, get over your fear, it's just a perception, and you just get over it, you get up and do it. Yes, I do agree that we have to overcome our fear, but I don't agree the facts that it is the same, you just get over it. There are steps to get over it, because the only similar thing that we are all experiencing is the word fear, F-E-A-R. You know that you're experiencing fear. Roxanna knows that she's experiencing fear. I know I'm experiencing fear. Tom knows that I don't know who Tom is, but Tom is experiencing fear. But our experience, our journey is so different. It's like when you line up, what you call track, you line up all side by side, and we're all running towards fear, running away from fear. It looks like the same. It's like fear, 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 but the running experience is so different. Your journey is it's so different, because your stamina to overcome the fear, your emotions, everyone's heart is different, even though our hearts are the same. Even though we have the same brain, but our brain is so different. It is so nuanced. People need to understand it is so nuanced. Everyone experiences it differently. Everyone takes time to overcome it differently. Some people take 3 years. Some people take one night. Like, okay, I'm done with this. Like you said, it's different. You experience fear in school differently. Roxanna experienced it differently. So I want people to know that fear is so nuanced. Even though, but if you get bullied, yes, you experience fear, but it's your journey. Do not give up your voice, express that voice. So I wanted to highlight that, because it was really powerful that you said. So thank you for sharing.
Yeah. One other thing just on that is fear sometimes is good, Same as like, I would say that shame, shame is often good because it helps really direct us to choose what is good. And so sometimes fear also protects us. And that's one thing I didn't say, a lot of it was, well, how do you overcome fear? But sometimes there's a reason why you're afraid. And maybe like, sometimes we have to trust our intuition. Like if we're afraid of someone or someone kind of gives us an uncomfortable feeling, a lot of times it's our intuition or that's our self, like telling us to stay away from that person or that place or that thing. If you're driving through, I'm from just outside of Detroit, but I'll be down in Detroit. And sometimes I'm afraid of certain neighborhoods or places. And there's a reason for that fear, because I probably should be afraid of that place. So I think it's also important for us to say like, I'm not going to live in fear. I'm not going to be a fearful person, but sometimes our fear in a way can be a positive, and it can protect us from something worse or something bad. So that's just one other thing I wanted to add.
Yeah, that's true. It's the flight. What do you call it? Fight or flight mode.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's so true. Like a great example is yourself and Roxanna. It's like you had fear, you experienced it, and then all of a sudden one day, you fought back. That's what is beautiful about fear as well. It's like, and two great examples right here, both of you. All right.
Yeah, I think she mentioned fear, but also when you said the driving through, well, I'm originally from Miami, so
yeah,
other areas, and I think it's more of a caution thing that you were getting at.
Mm-hmm.
So, it could be like you have a fear of something, or you have an elevated caution where you're just like, okay, I have to be a little bit more cautious. Just like as a woman walking from the mall to your car, there's a potential danger not to be on your phone, or, you got to carry some pepper spray, just because it's just, we have to have that level of checking your surroundings. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what you mean by that, right?
Yeah. You gotta be smart too, right?
Yes, yeah, definitely. You have to keep an eye out, because I feel like they look for those people who are just like, oh, I'm too busy today, like wrapped up in your brain. And honestly, that's how you survive, by having that awareness.
Yeah.
Yeah, awareness, that's really important to have. Well, thank you both of you for sharing your story and your journey and solutions. So I have prepared some questions for each of you. So we spoke about fear and not speaking up, and our voice being oppressed. So do you think, is there a correlation between fear and trust? Trust as in trusting ourselves, trusting others, when fear is inherently present?
I think it goes hand in hand. See, when you're fearful of something or someone, you often have trust issues. And sometimes you don't trust yourself. And I think that's part of it, when we're having a hard time trusting ourselves, we have to see, why do I have a hard time trusting myself? And fear will stem from that. At the same time, you're going to create fears if you don't trust yourself.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I completely agree with that. And I think it's really beautiful to even talk about that relationship that you have with yourself, that it's so important. You can overcome so many things if you have a great relationship with yourself. If you really love yourself, you're going to be a lot more confident, and you're going to have a lot more courage, and like anything that's kind of put in your way, especially anything any of your fears that come before you, you're going to power through them a lot better if you have a better relationship with yourself. So yeah, I totally agree with that. And with other people, if you're trusting of somebody, you're not going to be afraid of them. But I think when you start to have even like inklings of a little fear, there's like trust issues there. Do you really trust this person? And you need to listen to yourself in all those things.
Yeah. Yeah. And also like, I was just going to say something and I forgot. Yeah, but okay, what I wanted to say, I remember. When you have a fear of something and you start getting confidence, because you gain confidence into like when you start loving yourself and caring about yourself and all of this, you start gaining confidence and practicing. Like start doing something you are fearful of. And then you notice that that fear is not what you thought it was.
Mm-hmm.
You know, just like you mentioned, you had a hard time and you still have a hard time sometimes speaking up.
Mm-hmm.
I have that fear too. So I purposely get myself into situations like today where I have to speak up and I have to, you know, do something different. And I notice that every single time I do something different, I kind of like feel better. And I'm like, okay, so I'm accomplishing something new. You know, you either like it or you don't. And I feel like that's what fear is. Sometimes we don't know if we're going to like something, just like trying like a new vegetable or something. We don't know if we're going to like it. We're like fearful, but we tried it. Either you like it or you don't. That's what I tell my kids.
Yeah. Yeah. It's that uncertainty, you know, it's that uncertainty that I think for a lot of people in some of our fears, that's really the driving force, you know, and not always, but I think a lot of things that we all deal with is like this uncertainty. But yeah, you put yourself in situations, you're like, oh, actually, it wasn't that bad, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And when you're like, it wasn't that bad. Okay, let me try something else. It
Yeah.
can give you a little bit of confidence where you're like, okay, this fear is not what I thought it was.
Mm-hmm.
And then you could do that like throughout your life. And it's really, really good.
Mm-hmm. There's a freedom that comes with that too, you know, because you're breaking free of your fears, but also you feel empowered when you start doing things like that too.
Yeah.
I love it. I echo both of you, what you're saying. Your confidence heightens when the minute you trust you, like Roxanna and Kate, you mentioned do something and you think, oh, that was not so bad. Like Roxanna, you said today you put yourself in purposely put yourself in situations. I'm with you. I am absolutely with you because I was so afraid. I was so afraid of even starting this movement, even starting this webinar, because I have reached out to so many people, and people have said, oh, you're no name, you're nobody, you have got 400 followers, you're not really that skilled to be doing webinars or a movement. And I thought to myself, I have had enough of this BS. I heard that in my corporate life every single day. I heard that during my childhood every single day. And I'm going to do it. So I started off doing live Instagram live. I am terrified. I'm terrified to do Instagram live because you have to comb your hair. You've got to look good. You have to get out of your pajamas.
Sometimes you don't. Sometimes you don't. If I show you what I'm wearing, no, I'm wearing joggers. Okay, it's not like that. But I wanted to tell you something because I first heard this when I first started, and I had nobody. You have an Instagram account. You have a Twitter account. You have a business. You are an influencer. That's it. That's all you need.
Mm-hmm.
All you need is yourself and do what you have to do. Your value is not, it does not equal how many followers you have.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Because one day you could have tons of followers and the next day you could have nobody. So do not correlate those two things together. Do not. It's like the biggest thing that a lot of people do. It's not just you. A lot of people think, let me just, oh, you don't have enough followers for me to like even pay attention to you. Well, I'm here to tell you that that is pure BS, just like you said. Your value is not connected to followers. Your value is who you are.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually that'll show. But the connections that we're making here today is another one. And I've worked with you several times and I'm so happy to call you my friend because it's pure, it's not true. So just remember those people that told you no. And then whenever, you know, you do gain popularity because you're there, tell them no next time.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And like just your willingness, and I think all three of us can talk to this, is like your willingness to even step forward is more than most people are willing to do, because a lot of people, you know, they have their Instagram or whatever and they like just tweet, you know, put pictures up of like leaves and different things. It's like, no, you're actually producing content and you're putting things forward and you're willing to speak up. because a lot of people are terrified of putting their lives out there. And even I talked to a girl the other day, and she was like, I really want to start a blog, but what if I only get 5 followers? And I was like, those matter. And we need to start thinking about that maybe we don't connect with millions and millions of people every day, but the fact that you even connect with one person, that matters, because you might be the only person that they hear from. You might be the one person that touches their life. And so I think we need to just be focused on that, focused on the people that are right before us. And just like what Roxanna said, is like, that's what matters, is your willingness to put yourself out there. So I think it's great.
Oh,
yeah. You're creating your own content. That's valuable right there, because a lot of people, and I know this, they just, like, if I post something, they just regrab my post over and over. So it's so easy to do that. It's so easy to just go out and curate content from Pinterest and this and that and the other. And then they have X amount of followers. You're putting out your content. You're putting out your videos. You're putting out your energy, and it shows. So just continue to do that, and don't worry about any naysayers. Trust me.
Yeah, no, thank you. This right here is the reason why I left these 2 women. It's great community support, and this is how we need to start approaching lifting others up, being there for each other. It is like I said, it's like both of you mentioned, trusting ourselves. And sometimes I do struggle. I'm only human. I do struggle, but like, having women like both of you really helps, like, to see your content, what you're putting out there. Kate, you interview lots of women, and Roxanna, you talk about abuse and overcoming it on your Instagram live. And yes, I do log in and view you. It's like, sometimes I feel like, oh, I'm creeping on her, but no, I have seen you grow tremendously, like from 2 years ago, how you started. Because I remember you didn't want to reveal your name or reveal your be on video, and then you just grown drastically. Like both of you mentioned, your confidence comes out when you start doing it a little bit. It's like riding a bicycle. Oh, I fall. Never mind. Let me try it again. It's just like that, and it's amazing. It's amazing how your confidence can grow drastically if you believe in yourself and if you trust in you. That's fantastic. I've got one more last question. I know that we've got 4 more minutes, but I'm going to hold that question. I'm going to open up the floor if you have got any questions for each other or for me. Roxanna or Kate?
So Kate, I really, really enjoyed listening to your story. Just like you said, it is different than our story. So it was nice to hear that perspective. You reminded me of someone else that actually had, they were sick during childhood. And then you also mentioned something that you were scared in class of participating. My son actually is very shy. And I was just wondering, like, how did you gain the confidence to just, open yourself up just a little bit?
Yeah.
Well, during that age.
So I think one of the thing that really changed everything for me was finding some sort of talent or like a hobby. Like if your son, my advice would always be is if there's something that he loves or he likes or even has an interest, even if he's not good at it, like even if it's music or art or whatever, some sort of hobby, it's almost like the magic feather from Dumbo. And that's how Irish dancing was for me. I mean, I wasn't like, I don't think I was like wasn't like a championship dancer, but I loved going, and that gave me confidence because it helped me see my value and my purpose, and that I just found something that I loved, and it kind of almost became a flower, it helped me like really evolve as a person. It was almost like a flower blooming. And so I would say that to anybody, and I'd say that to adults too. I mean, so many people that we all know, they're miserable, or they don't like their job, or they don't like, I always say, find a hobby or even like a volunteer thing. I mean, maybe it's going to a soup kitchen. Maybe it's not even like a hobby, but some way that you can kind of see your value and see your purpose. And so I don't know what that would be for your son or for anybody else who's listening, but find something that you're doing, because it takes you outside of your box, like that quote from Dale Carnegie, where it's like, you know, if you want to be fearful, sit in your little box, you know, sit at home. But if you want to overcome it, you need to go out and do something. And so that could be anything. That could be a hobby. It could be a boxing class. And I try and do that for myself too, is like, I've always kind of got some sort of like hobby that I'm learning. I just went through a boxing class. So that's why I was talking about it, but just something that kind of like gets you out of your usual everyday thing. Swimming, you know, something, I think it just changes. It changes.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree.
Oh, this is amazing to have both of you. I know we have got 1 more minute left, but
Yeah.
I want everyone to hear your voices. So where can people find you? Let's start with Roxanna. Where can people find you on social media?
Okay, so I'm on Instagram and I'm at the Black Sheep Survives. You can find so much support there, so many lovely people. No one harasses you, because now I have this policy where if you're a bully, I'm gonna block you, and I did so this morning. I also talk about life after abuse on my personal Instagram, which is roxysafdia.com, and I know that's a complicated name. So if you go on the Black Sheep, you'll probably see my writing on there, and it's life after abuse.
Thank you. And I'll also put links once the video comes out. So Kate, where can people find you?
They can find me at onegirlrevolution.com. That's the number onegirlrevolution.com. We're on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook, and it's all One Girl Revo. So the number One Girl REVO. And then you can find me at Ms. Kate Bryan, BRYAN is how you spell my last name, on Instagram. And yeah, all the other Twitter, I think, is that as well.
Fantastic. Oh my God. This is not the end. This is not the end. This is just the first webinar that we are having, and there's more to come. Thank you again, Kate and Roxanna, for coming on and sharing your beautiful stories, your wisdom, your insight, your solutions. It's been such an honor, and I'm going to post it all over social media. So thank you again for coming on board.
Thank you, Mila. Nice to meet you, Kate.
It was nice to meet you, Roxanna. This was awesome. Thank you so much.